It's natural and important to be bad at something when you first try it. What matters is if you have the strength to stand back up again. I will refer to many things about the manga I created for the first manga contest I ever entered as bad or not great, but I want to make it abundantly clear where I'm coming from. I went into this experience knowing full well it would be a learning experience. In order to improve, I have to see where I'm lacking. In order to improve, I need to refuse stagnation and evolve. So bear with me while I recant and reflect on my ruthless experience entering the Kadokawa World Manga Contest. But wait, there's something that doesn't suck. That's you hitting the subscribe button. I couldn't think of a better one to do it here, if I'm being so real. Anyways, the first step in this journey was to create the story and characters. I wasn't confident in my ability to draw out the story, and I'd seen other mangaka use written scripts as bases for their stories. And given I have a master's degree in creative writing, whatever that means, I figured I could use those skills first. Because the fun part about making a manga is that it is 8 different skill sets all bashed into one. In order to start the manga, I need to be the writer, character designer, concept artist, storyboard artist, etc, etc. And the even more fun part is that I'm competent at exactly one of those. But regardless of that, a story isn't just going to manifest itself, so I consulted my notes of random story ideas I had from offhand thoughts at work or lying in bed, and also the stories that I like, and mashed them all into one. First, I built the story around the emotions of that one scene in the movie theater in Chainsaw Man where the man comes home from war. The mother would be filled by a variation of one of my OC's, Pale, except this time she's an angel-esque character instead of a dinosaur girl, and would also don the name Sere. The name is equal parts that I love 4-letter names. I don't know why, they're just simple and I like them a lot. Another part is an OC that exists in my head, and a very unsubtle reference to Sere's fauna. I worked for a prior OC because I started work on this contest in January when Spilled Ink dropped their sponsored video about it, which meant that the deadline was 3 months later because their video came out multiple months into the contest. So with 3 months left, I had to get into gear very quickly. This isn't to say I didn't create a new character though, I actually made 2 to fill out the family dynamic. First is Fiel, who is Sere's husband, who only appears in a flashback to balance out the other character, Iaro, who is the secondary protagonist and Sere's son. I named him after the flower because it means everlasting love, and also flower names are great and easy, and one of my go-tos for I need a cool character name that I can make thematically relevant. And with the 3 completed, I etched out my first draft of the story. My first draft of the story focused on the Harbingers, a group of angelic warriors who serve as basically the strongest soldier in an army. There was a war going on for generations where the Harbingers were bound to fight in. Sere was the prior Harbinger, the Harbinger of Fortune as per the title, but managed to end the war alongside Fiel, so her son Yara has lived a life of peace. He has not been at war yet. But alas, the war is returned, and now Yara was forced into his duties as the next Harbinger and has to go off to fight tomorrow in the narrative. The story takes place the night before he is sent off to war as him and Sere reflect on the peace and their time as Harbingers / people and their upbringings and stuff like that. Sere is haunted by war while Yaro tries to be a ray of hope formed from the peaceful life that he knew and the desire to relish that and impart it onto the future. The story has them grapple with these 2 emotions and ultimately ends with this ambiguous ending where Yaro goes off to war and Sere has to send him off melancholically, because I love that word. Now as for the first draft itself, it ended up way too in the weeds about the Harbingers themselves. I had them go to the grave where all the prior ones are buried and focused on this idea of duties and cycles. However, I thought for a one-shot, it felt like I was inflating the world without progressing the plot. And with only 60 pages, I wanted to make sure the plot was tight, since ultimately the weeds are not as interesting as the flowers. And I needed to move the plot forward. And lore and world building, at least in my opinion, are definitely not as important to get into the thick of in a self-contained story. That's for the serialized version. The bones of the story were still good though, but I wanted to cull it down to be tighter and more focused on the dynamic between Yaro and Sere, since they are the 2 main characters. And with that, I finished my first draft and took notes of what I wanted to try and do differently before starting on my second and final draft. I probably could and should have done a third one, but the clock was ticking and the time I needed to start drawing was rapidly approaching. The final plot took the story at the beginning of Sere winning the war and the end with Yaro leaving, and reworked the middle to be focused on Viel's death and tying Yaro and Viel together as sort of echoes of each other, where Yaro reminds Sere of Viel. Their kind of optimism and genuine desire for peace warm up Sere's view of sending Yaro off to war, even if it's still kind of murky. I did briefly humor a happier ending for the story where Yaro returns as an adult with like a family and kids, but it felt very cliche, so I scrapped it. I already liked the ambiguous ending, but I had an itch, so I scratched it and ultimately didn't like it. But that's good. You should experiment while you're writing. try the thing you have an inch to, and if it doesn't work, you can tuck in your back pocket. Maybe you'll use it later. But with the story done, now comes the hard part. I have to actually draw the manga. I allotted the entirety of March for drawing because this was the first time I have made a manga, and also I work a full-time job, so I don't have 8 hours a day to spend drawing. I had 2 to 3 hours of dedicated work tops, except on days off when I had a bit more, and even then it was still a long time. But let my example serve as a reminder that you can always carve out time to try something new. If you really want to do something, you'll find the time. You'd be surprised how much of your day can be shifted or optimized just a little bit, or carved out, or any way of meandering or moving little parts to fit it in, even if it's only like 30 minutes. For the storyboards of the manga, I drafted them on a day off and did so in a physical sketchbook I bought a while ago and have kind of just had sitting around. They're very rough layouts of things because I wanted them to just be baselines for referencing when actually drawing things in Clip Studio Paint, which took about an afternoon to do all of, but once it was done, I moved on to actually drawing the manga. It's here that I need to give a disclaimer again. I'm going to orient this section around the issues I ran into because there are many, but again, these issues are important to recognize because now I know them and I can prove later. Growth is a process, and with each individual step being important on that journey. The failures are just important as the successes. The first issue I ran into was text, specifically text size. While working on storyboard, I roughly wrote down dialogue, but my handwriting fucking sucks, to be kind. Because I'm left-handed, which isn't really an excuse. College note-taking kind of skewered it because professors think speeding through PowerPoints at light speed while I can barely keep up and have to take notes is an okay thing. And also because 90% of my writing at work is scribbling my signature on stuff every day, so it's just kind of naturally degraded. But more importantly, I can't write physically in a specific font size, nor could I find any real helpful info about what size the text should be in a manga. Basically, every resource says some variation of, it should be big enough to be readable, and I'm like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Can you give me a number, please? I started with 20-point font, but ended up on 14-point font in the Clip Studio Paint manga font. But it was also here that I realized I was on version 2.0 of Clip Studio Paint, which does not have the manga font, because I was trying to upgrade to 5.0, and then I had to spend 30 minutes trying to buy my way from the current from 2 to 5, which is really annoying, and I wish they would just make a bulk one that I could just spend all the money at once. But I got there. Do I know a 14-point font is good or standard? Nope. I got no idea. But it looks readable to me, and is small enough that I didn't feel like the page was dominated by text bubbles. As for the bubbles themselves, I kind of just placed them to fit within the overall vibe of the panel that I wanted to make, instead of being just kind of willy-nilly with it. I thought about where would this look good to place that is also not super intrusive. And all this leads me into issue 2, which is that my hands have not quite caught up to my eye. When designing the page layouts, I kept coming back to Fantasy World June, which I made a video on. It's a very good video, very good manga, and it's incredibly creative paneling. I want to try it for myself because I am the author, I can do what I want, and if I think it looks cool, I'm going to do it. My other primary influences were Basara/Seven Seas because Yumi Tamura is one of the greatest mangaka of all time, and I want to do a big video studying her. Her use of the page and paneling is just so jaw-droppingly beautiful, and even if I can't come close to her quality, by being cognizant and trying to operate by referencing her style, hopefully some of it rubs off. My other biggest influence was Akatsuki no Yona because I was reading at the time. The most obvious influences from the aforementioned series was how the characters engage with the panel. I think just going box to box is really boring, and I don't personally like doing that, so I try to do interesting things where possible. Like with the panel where I split Sari up across 4 panels to show the contrasting worlds, or the ones where I very poorly draw a bunch of kids dancing around a fire to represent the freedom and happiness of peace. But the problem here is that I have these cool ideas in my head, but I do not have the technical skill to execute them to a degree I can be truly happy with. But even if I can capture an ounce of the cool idea for a manga panel, that's a start. I always have more chances to try again. As long as I'm alive, I have infinite chances to make a panel that is as cool on the page as it is in my head. And I've been trying to make cool panels since I started drawing. One of my earliest comic attempts was one where I tried to cut the page by a guy getting shot in the head, and using the bullet trajectory to divide the page in half. I also tried making a panel that was shot from outside the building the scene was happening in. I just want to make things look cool, even if I do not have the skill to back them up just yet. Because ultimately, do I think these look as good as they could have? Not even close, but I tried them because I lose nothing by trying. As cliche as the "you miss 100% of the shots you don't take" saying is, it's very true, and for me personally, I'd rather try something interesting and it suck than stick with the safe and bland option. I want to make cool manga with interesting uses of the page, and by even attempting that, I'm improving. I'm making the manga I would want to read. I know the manga I make for this contest will not be great or maybe even good, but I can rest easier knowing I did what I wanted to. The second to last issue is basically a more focused version of issue 2. I'm still very bad at drawing the human form and faces from various angles. My solution to this was to make a reference sheet of various angles and try my best to make one on the list. And while this is not a long-term solution because it's actually helping me build a base understanding of the human form and how to do it, given the time frame, it's a decent enough idea. The faces themselves were simple because I don't really know how to draw manga faces in black and white yet. I'm so used to colored illustrations that suddenly losing all of those was a struggle. Some of it was also time crunch and acceptance that as long as it conveys the emotion, it's functional. But I do want to get better at it for the future, so I've been trying to study that more. And with the face covered, there is the whole rest of the body, where I struggled as well. Again, my hands cannot match my eyes, but thankfully Clip Studio Paint has the 3D models to use for posing, which is good for speed and efficiency, but for the future, I want to do all the poses on my own with the 3D models as references and not things I draw over, because I just want to get better at drawing the human form on my own. A lot of this came from I had a cool idea for a pose, but again came up against both the 3D model being hard to pose and my lack of understanding of how clothes work at interesting angles. I can somewhat combat this by doing a lot of face reactions because it's easy to solve a problem when it doesn't exist. But I'm still working with a human character who has a body, so I can't run from it forever. The same applies to the final issue, which is drawing backgrounds. I saved this for last because I just used the preset Clip Studio Paint ones. And the Zabraki brush set had a cloud brush, and I was goated for that. The few times I didn't use those, it is abundantly clear, because I have maybe 1% of understanding 3D backgrounds, more or less, but I definitely don't have enough to understand it or apply it to make even decent ones. I kind of just accepted defeat here, but with future attempts, I will hopefully have more time to actually make half decent backgrounds or to learn Blender to make my own backgrounds or some way to combat this issue. And with that, we reach the point of a finished manga. Harbinger of Fortune is a completed manga regardless of the quality. The job is done even if it sucked a lot to get there. Every step of the journey was being humbled, but also served as further appreciation for mangaka. They do all this in a month or sometimes a week. Granted some of assistants, but not all of them. But hopefully one day I can stand alongside them with my own serialized manga. This is just step 1 on the journey. There will be many more steps. For now though, I went into this with the mindset of I just need to finish this, I will not win anything, but now there is one completed manga under my belt and a YouTube script waiting for it whenever it's done. None of my time was wasted, and in 5 years maybe I can look back and see my growth over time. I'm a sucker for watching artistic growth, and there's no better feeling than seeing how much better I've gotten, even if it's only in increments. And with the completion of this manga, I'm keenly aware of all my shortcomings and can work to improve them. I know my backgrounds are bad, my faces are inconsistent, and I have no idea how to draw clothes. I don't look like blobs of black, but I know all of these now, and I can fix them for the future manga that I make. And if you thought I'd forgot my court-ordered IQ mention of the video, well, surprised you already missed 3. But for a more concentrated dose, this whole journey is a part of the process. Making this manga was a part of the little daily growth that will help me get better. This is just one volleyball match, and while I may have lost this time, loss is the perfect chance to grow. My flaws were laid bare, abundantly so, right in front of my face. This video serves as acknowledgement of them and an earnest desire to improve on them. I may have been defeated by this hellish deadline on my very first manga contest submission, but who knows what I'll become tomorrow. Who knows how much I will level up for my second manga or my third. They're all stepping stones on the journey to become a great artist who hopefully can be a serialized manga artist one day. So stick with me here as I take you along with me to grow, to flourish, and to struggle the whole way there.